Praise the Lord, everyone. Professor Roop here. Welcome back to Apostolic Church History Podcast. And as you can see, I'm still in Lystra, Italy. We still have this nice view of the Mediterranean Sea behind me. We're on the 7th floor, and we have a great view of the Mediterranean Sea. We're not that far from it. And it's a great view, and we're having a great time here in Italy. Especially Rome. We've been going to a couple churches in Rome, and it's great worshiping God with our fellow Christians in Rome. And it's great to be here. And our next journey will be to the island of Malta. We'll be there for 4 weeks. It's interesting being in Rome and witnessing about Christ in Rome to people, and it's obvious that not two people do that. So, if you like this podcast, go ahead and subscribe and share it on social media with all your friends and family, and so that we can all learn about the apostles to today. Apostolic Church history. It's good to know history. It's good to know Pentecostal history, apostolic history. It's good to know that. Eventually we're going to get to Azusa Street and all that good stuff. But today we're learning about Barnabas and Paul on Paul's first missionary journey. It's called, I don't like to call it that. It's really Barnabas's missionary journey. But Barnabas is very cool about it. And he just wants to preach the gospel. He doesn't care who gets credit for it, or because he's a seasoned saint, older gentleman. So on Acts chapter 14, we are at verse 6, but verse 5, it's interesting to note that they were at Iconium, Barnabas and Paul, and they heard about threats that they were going to be stoned in Iconium because they had been there a while. They had converted some Jews and some Greeks, and they started a little church, and they were there a while. Luke doesn't tell us how long they were there. He said just for a little while. It could be a couple weeks. It could be a couple months. Luke doesn't really specify the time period. But it was long enough where Paul, could preach deeper, more penetrating messages, teach more of the Old Testament, where to find Jesus in the Old Testament, and that Jesus was the Messiah of that day and today. And also signs and wonders. They performed signs and wonders because they had time to do so. People, their faith was built up, and they were able to receive signs and wonders from the apostles. This upset the unbelieving Jews and Greeks to talk about stoning Barnabas and Paul. And I said on the previous podcast, or the podcast before that, is because in the Aramaic, Paul was preaching that Jesus was Master Yahweh. Master Yahweh. And master is a common phrase that Paul used to refer to Jesus. And God was master. He was the slave of God in Jesus, and God's the master. He used that terminology because slavery was a common institution back then. In that day, 50%, one half of the population of the Roman Empire was enslaved. And slaves were from your gardener who was doing the gardening work to your financial advisor at the bank, at the at the temple. Doctors, moneymen, educated people were also slaves. It wasn't just, when people think of slaves, they think of uneducated people of the lower classes. That wasn't true in the Roman period. A lot of educated people were also slaves. Because if you're born into slavery, you were a slave, and if you were able to get an education, and sometimes you were, either through schooling or as a apprentice, you can receive some knowledge in a trade or business or an upper level education. You're still a slave. You could more opportunities to buy yourself out of slavery, and you could back then buy yourself out of slavery. If you presented enough money, you could buy yourself out of slavery or buy somebody else out of slavery. So the Jews thought that was blasphemy. Now your English translations, none of your English translations, including your King James Version, will say that the term Lord in the original language meant Master Yahweh. So you have to go to your Aramaic translation to see that, which is the original translation that the scriptures were written in, or Hebrew. Aramaic and Hebrew are sister languages. So you can also get a Hebrew to English translation, which it will be in there as well. So they thought that was blasphemous, and they wanted to stone Paul for that, which in the Old Testament was the penalty for doing so. And some kind of alarm just went off. I didn't do it. I'm on tape not doing it, so it's off in the distance. Anyway, so Acts chapter 14, verse 9, I'll read it to you. The same heard Paul speak, who, steadfastly holding him, and perceiving that he had faith to be healed. Let's go to verse 6. We're actually in verse 6. I thought I was kind of lost there for a minute. Acts chapter 14, verse 6. Excuse me, my bad. They were aware of it and fled unto Lystra and Derbe, cities of Iconium, and unto the region that lieth around about. So the apostles feared for their safety, feared for their life, and the lives of the people who are with them, their entourage, like Luke. They decided to get out of town. And Iconium was a town of about 50,000 in that day. Most scholars say from 30 to 80,000. So I'm kind of cutting in the middle, 50,000. Say 50,000. I was looking at a rainstorm off to my right there. So they fled unto Lystra and Derbe. If I'm pronouncing that right, excuse me. I don't pronounce words that good. So Lystra was a small Roman colonial town. And it was referred to as a small town or a market town. Probably a town of under 5,000. Under 5,000. That area, it was about 60 miles from Iconium. 60 miles. For my non-American friends, that would be 90 to 100 kilometers. And they traveled, it was southeast, about 90 miles southeast of Iconium. That's where they fled. The area is, according to historical researchers, was a bare and dreary region. It was unwatered by streams and lakes and ponds. It had no streams, lakes, or ponds. And occasionally had these inundations of rainwater, so it would downpour. And that's actually similar to how it is in Texas. You can go whole month of August not have any rain at all, and then you have this gully washer come through and just give you 5 or 6 inches of rain all in a couple hours, which is common for Texas. So it was kind of similar to that. No surface water on its own. And you had these downpours and floods. I'm sure it flooded. Strabo, he was a historian of that time, mentions one place where they even sold water in Lystra. So, with no streams or lakes or ponds, they had no really good source of drinking water. Apparently they didn't have many wells either, if Strabo is mentioning a vendor that would sell drinking water. So that's interesting. Now Strabo, if you want to know who he is, he was born in 64 BC and died in 24 AD. So he lived just before the times of the apostles, just before the start of the church. But he was a historian of the area. He was a prominent Greek geographer and historian. He wrote a 17-volume work called Geographica. So I think you've heard me mention several Roman historians of that day, but Strabo was a geographer and a historian. So he studied the geography of that region. In a 17-volume work, Geographica, that was quite an undertaking. Writing a book isn't easy. Writing a book's hard. I've written 8 of them, so I know. It's quite a project to write a book. And if you go on to Amazon, you can see all my books, and they're all for sale at a nominal price. So. All right. So Lystra, they fled to Lystra first. Lystra was founded in 6 BC. So probably 50 years prior to that, it was founded. Founded as a Roman military outpost. And that's because the Romans had trouble with the native tribes in that area. Now, I always mention there's a lot of Greeks living in the cities in Asia Minor, but the Greeks weren't native there. The Greeks were native to Greece. But the Greeks colonized Asia Minor to a great extent, especially the northern part along the Black Sea, because Greeks were sailors and they shipped by ship a lot. So they had ports along the Black Sea and along the Mediterranean on the south side of Asia Minor. Lots of Greek cities, colonies, but also like Iconium was inside Asia Minor on a trade road. But the natives to Asia Minor didn't like to be ruled by the Greeks or the Romans. And so the Romans had a lot of trouble with them, so they built Lystra as a military outpost. Now, when the United States was conquering the West, we did the same thing. We would build military forts in areas that there was a lot of unrest from the American Indians. And so those forts were built, and of course you had a troop there of military men, a division of cavalry maybe, and of course those people would need services. And as all young military guys, all military men kind of want is booze and prostitutes. So, okay, I said it. It's not a nice world we live in. It's not a lot of times not even a good Christian world we live in. But that's the case. That is the case. Young men, especially in the military-minded guys, they want prostitutes and they want booze and they want a good time to blow off steam from fighting hostile forces and surviving. I was in the military for 4 years. I understand the mindset. I didn't partake in that, but I understand it because I served with those kind of folks. And then, so you had, of course, mountain men would always visit the western forts as well. So you had a lot of people of ill repute at these military bases. And of course, you would attract other people like laundry women or people who served food and give you a place to sleep, like a roadhouse. So I can imagine that this Roman military post would be very much the same way, very much the same thing, attracting not the best of people. Now this town was founded 50 years prior, so other people eventually came to this town, a better class of sort. So it wasn't all those kind of folks, but probably a great majority would be. And so why would Barnabas and Paul, if they had to flee to Lystra? Well, there's 3 reasons, I think. First of all, they're trying to work their way back to Antioch in Syria, which was their home base. They're going in that direction. And Lystra is the next sizable town or market village. It didn't have a synagogue. So that tells me that Barnabas and Paul were seeking safety rather than their usual template of going to a synagogue, preaching, then going to the Greeks. So they just wanted to get out of town quick, because who wants to be stoned? I mean, I don't want to be stoned. You probably don't want to be stoned either. I don't blame them. So they just went to the next town, Didn't have a synagogue, but that's all right. They're preaching to the Greeks too. And so there was a Roman fort there, and so Paul was a Roman citizen. I think Barnabas was too, I don't know. So they would seek protection with the Roman troops. If a group of Jews who are not citizens were trying to attack you and you're a Roman citizen, the Roman military would protect you. They'd even let you live in their camp because you're a Roman citizen. Roman citizens had a lot of fringe benefits. Fringe benefits that we don't have today. So it's kind of... Today, citizenship has its benefits, but if you're a Roman citizen, it would give you a lot more benefits. You can, going from place to place, if you're on the public roadway, you can actually travel with the Roman legions, and they would protect you because you're a citizen. That was one benefit. Another benefit, it would protect you from being crucified. That's why Jesus and Peter were crucified, because they weren't Roman citizens. Paul was beheaded because he was a Roman citizen. Beheading is a very quick, easy death. Certainly compared to crucifixion, which may take up to 3 days or longer. Depending if they gave you water to drink. So, and there was other benefits as well. But Barnabas and Paul knew that they could find safety and protection in the Roman military camp that was at Lystra. And that's one of the reasons we went there. Plus, there's sinners there. Barnabas and Paul were attracted to sinners. As I mentioned before, people who hang around military camps tend to be people who sold alcohol and prostitutes and maybe drug dealers and people like that. There were sinners there, so Barnabas and Paul were attracted maybe to audience of sinners who needed Jesus, who needed salvation. Who doesn't need salvation more than sinners? Right. Who tends to listen to preachers more than sinners? Sinners do, because they know they're living wrong. Now I'm here in Latispoli, Italy. Italians live pretty good. All your Europeans live really good. Comfortable, safe lives here in Europe. And that's why they're so hard to witness to or preach to, because they're comfortable. They have everything. They have need of nothing, as the Bible says. They have need of nothing. So it's harder to preach Jesus to them, that they're sinners and going to hell, because they're living pretty comfortable lives. And that's another reason why Barnabas and Paul probably were attracted to Lystra. So there's 3 reasons, good reasons, I came up with. And this little town, probably under 5,000, was made up of Roman and Greeks. There's no synagogue there. And Derbe, which was anywhere from 30 to 60 miles distance from Lystra, somewhere around 30, 60 miles. I would say 30 miles, looking at the map. To my European friends or non-American friends, that's anywhere from 50 to 100 kilometers. So maybe, let's just say 75 kilometers distant. And that was also a Roman military camp as well, because it's in the same region and the same natives who don't like the Romans. So being 30 miles distance, that's about a day's mark. They can go back and forth. They can easily go back and forth to each of these towns, and towns were similar. Or better yet, Barnabas go one town and Paul the other town, and preach at both of them at the same time. Maybe they did that. Luke doesn't tell us, but could be. So Acts chapter 14, verse 7, and there they preached the gospel, and there they preached the gospel. That's their evangelist, their evangelistic tour. They're preaching the gospel. That's the number one thing that they did. Luke is just kind of emphasizing that for us. They weren't there on vacation. They're there to preach the gospel. Acts chapter 14, verse 8. It says, and there sat a certain man at Lystra, impotent in his feet, being a cripple from his mother's womb, who never had walked. This is a lucky man, actually. It was common back in that day to leave if you had a baby who was handicapped or just unwanted, to take them to the nearest cornfield and leave them there so they can die of exposure. That was common back in that day. It's common today as well in third world countries. My wife and I have gone to Guatemala several times. And some of the babies that the orphanages get were children that were left in cornfields. So it's still being done today in third world countries. So the parents of this baby boy, chose not to do that, which I think is amazing. It's wonderful. Lucky for him, he got to live. Yeah, he got to live, but he was crippled from his birth. Luke mentions that because of the upcoming story, which I no longer have time for. Time to go. Thank you for tuning in this week's Apostolic Church History Podcast. Thank you very much. I'm honored that you would watch, and certainly watch to the end. This podcast comes out every Friday at 7 p.m. Central American Standard Time. They're all recorded and here on Apostolic Church History YouTube channel, and I have the podcast. All the podcasts are on here. Also, my last semester when I taught Apostolic Theological Seminary, this class, and watch those as well. They're available all free of charge. You don't have to subscribe or pay monthly like a lot of YouTube channels. Everything here is free. I don't want to put an obstacle in front of people trying to learn more about Scripture. So thank you for tuning in. Share this channel. And remember, don't give up on religion until you tried Pentecost. Thank you, and see you next week.